I'll turn things over to Robin, introduce our speaker.
And just to jump in here quickly, hey, I'm Robin. I'm the partnership manager at Remake and wanted to provide a bit of context into how we are so lucky to have Caroline on this call today. We were introduced a couple weeks ago via a recruiter who works in the fashion space. And when Caroline was introducing herself, she talked about, how she has 20 years of experience in sustainable fashion. And I was immediately like, whoa, this is so cool. And, did a little Googling and was just, so impressed by what the little, my internet stalking had discovered. And then also just was really excited by Caroline's energy. So I was like, Remake would be so grateful to have you here today to talk about how you've built a career. I mean, you really are a pioneer in this industry. And I'm just really excited to hear, all of the different things you've done. And then also kind of leading to where you are now. So yeah, I'll just please take it away.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Sam. And yeah, thank you for inviting me. So I struggled to make this concise about the story about my career concise because it has been 20 years now, so it's hard to button that up. But I went to business school at Indiana University first, which was the pragmatic thing to do, but really got me comfortable with spreadsheets, which is a good thing. I'm a definitely right and left brained person, so I like numbers and I like arts and fashion and design. And then after that, my first job was at DKNY on the business side. And it was definitely eye-opening. It was pretty stressful and I thought wasteful and inefficient, despite the fact it was my first job. But I had grown up in a family business and seen how well-run companies work. So to me, it was pretty eye-opening. And it led me to kind of honestly soul search at a young age. And I discovered the work of this woman, Linda Gross, who is a real pioneer in the industry. She started the e-collection for Esprit, which was a really cool brand when I was growing up. Started by Doug Tompkins and Susie Buell. Doug Tompkins and Yvonne Chouinard were best friends. Doug Tompkins has passed. He started the North Face, and he's also a real pioneer in the movement. And Linda Gross was teaching and building this sustainability curriculum at this art school in San Francisco, now called CCA. At the time, it was called CCAC, or California College of Arts and Craft. And they also had a very strong, the arts and craft movement was a real inspiration for the program. So you learned a lot about construction and draping, and I wanted to be really hands-on. So Linda became both a teacher and a mentor to me, and continues to be. She's now the head of the department there. And she took me on this tour. There's this organization called the Sustainable Cotton Project, which takes large companies primarily on these tours of conventional and organic cotton farms. And this has been going on for at least 20 years. And it's why this particular tour is why Yvonne Chouinard in Patagonia is started on their sustainability journey and converted to 100% organic cotton. Why Nike has actually been blending organic cotton into their cotton supply for decades, sort of secretly. And Williams-Sonoma, Marks and Spencer, Target, you name it, they've all been on this very influential tour. And that tour was so influential to me that it has sort of set the tone for the rest of my career, and a commitment to pursuing a different way of designing. And Linda also taught me sort of what I call cradle to cradle thinking, or not, it's not just designing beautiful things. It's really thinking about how the beginnings from seed and earth to the end, and now we're thinking in a more circular way to how to there is no end to anything. There is no waste. So that was a really formative time for me. And then after that, I went back to New York, and I worked for Maria Cornejo, who's now a really amazing sustainability pioneer in the space. She really appealed to me at the time because she created what I thought was slow fashion, pieces that you'd really invest in they were all unique patterns. She wasn't like refabricating anything. She had an atelier and a really talented pattern and sample maker, and she made everything in New York. And so that was an incredible experience. And then after that, I started my own brand, Uluru, ULURU, which was primarily knitwear based, but then grew into some zero waste wovens and pattern making. And I picked knitwear because I had gotten some experience with it with Maria, but it's sort of these timeless pieces, and I had inherited quite a bit of knitwear and cashmere from my grandmother, and I just love the idea of if I had the ability to design something both emotionally and physically durable that someone would bond with and be able to keep and give to their granddaughter. Like I received these beautiful pieces that I literally still have to this day. I'm 43. Then that was just really satisfying to me as a designer. And so I also partnered with this company called The Laundress that creates, it's almost like hair conditioner for knits. It's non-toxic organic materials, so that also extends the life. So I did a lot of like outreach on how to care and extend the life of your garments. Then 2008 happened, and I had grown pretty fast. So by that time I was in like Nordstrom's and Barney's and Holt Renfrew and Harvey Nichols and boutiques. And that actually made it harder for me to sort of survive because I had, my overhead had grown to a place that I couldn't like take off a year or seasons while, we waited for the economy to recover. And my factories wanted bigger orders, higher prices, and longer lead times. And my biggest vendors like Nordstrom's wanted the exact opposite. They wanted shorter lead times, lower prices, and smaller orders. So I closed that in like 2009, I think. But at the time I had this leftover inventory. And so I reached out to Natalie Channon of Alabama Channon, who her whole business at that time was based on upcycling materials. So we upcycled a lot of my dead stock into really like hand stitched, embroidered, beautiful, like one of a kind pieces. And then I ended up going to work for her for a while. And she's just this she still is this really nimble, revolutionary, entrepreneuring business person. If you don't know about her, Google Alabama Channon like right now. She, both from a design standpoint and a business model standpoint, she's I could talk about that for the entire hour basically. So I worked for her for a while, and we developed an indigo collection. Actually, there was a priest in the Bronx who started an indigo bath because he was creating like clothes for missionaries in Guatemala. And so we ended up indigo dyeing this organic cotton and then hand stitching it in Alabama and created the Alabama denim collection.
That's so cool. Caroline,
yeah,
I'm going to interrupt you for a moment.
Yeah.
As you've been sharing your story, it sounds like there've definitely been some key mentors, a lot of them who are women, who have really influenced your career. And I'm wondering, from Linda Gross to Alabama Channon, and I wonder if you could talk a bit about how you developed those relationships. As someone who was coming up, and then also as someone who was a bit more, established in her career, but still, learning and collaborating.
Sure. So with Linda, I just applied to the program and got in, so that was easy. And then, she just, I don't know, I think I just bothered her and got her attention and took interest in like what she was saying and took it to heart. And, probably not all students, especially at that time, were really that interested in sustainability. That's different now, but at the time. And then Maria, I actually had a good friend that I'd gone to CCAC with, and her mom was actually her mom's a famous fashion photographer. Her sister's a famous stylist, and we were working for both of them. And I was helping her on New York Magazine was doing like a spring style section, and I was looking through, well, it was style.com, now it's vogue.com, style.com, looking at all the looks and making recommendations for the spread. And I came and I told my friend, I was like, the only designer that's really excites me, that's doing anything really original in New York, is this woman, Maria Cornejo. And she said, oh, we just got back from Tulum with them. So, so I lucked out, and I was an intern at first, and we just hit it off. It just was a small studio. We shared the same values for like the craft of garment making. And there's a vocabulary there, and there's also that you share, that someone recognizes, and they're like, oh, you're my people, I want to work with you. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happened with Natalie. Is, I was really interested in upcycling and sustainability and preserving craft, and we actually talked a lot about like macroeconomics and how capitalism is a struggle for craftspeople, or unfair to craft people. And there was this language, and so you recognize, you sort of recognize each other, and it makes it a lot, it makes that a lot easier. But yeah, most of my career has been like reference based. Like someone says, oh, you need to talk to Caroline because we have these common values and belief systems and interests. Yeah.
That's so cool. Someone put this told me lately, this idea of like following the breadcrumbs. Like you said, you spoke this language, and it's because you were following things that interested you, and then it led naturally to these conversations because you cared so much about it, and the people you work with could sense that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they definitely could. Yeah.
So I cut you off when you were telling about the upcycling, but what happened next?
So then after Alabama Shannon, I ended up going to Rogan and Loom State. And so Loom State at the time was sort of this pioneering organic denim brand. And I was there for a little bit, and actually ended up becoming really close with Rogan, the actual person, who's still a really dear friend to this day, who actually is now a sculptor and furniture maker. You should check out his stuff. It's really amazing. So I got a really lovely friendship out of that. And then actually Rogan recommended me for a job at this brand, Freeman Sporting Club, which, because I had been working on quite a bit of menswear at Rogan and really loved it. I really liked menswear, partially because I felt like it was innately sustainable, because men, at least at the time, tended to really like more durable, long-lasting, not trend driven garments. And so I was at Freeman Sporting Club for about 5 years. That was a really great job because I had a lot of autonomy, and it wasn't necessarily it didn't have sustainability in the title, but because I had so much autonomy and control from design through production, I could really control the sustainability of the brand. So I was able to choose the materials I wanted to for the most part. I created a repair program. So because we had tailors in-house and sewers in-house, we were able to repair things. We had a made-to-measure program and a bespoke program, which, tends to not end up in landfills if you make, custom clothing. And everything we made was mostly, I think almost everything we made was made within a 10-mile radius of our office in New York. We did import some sweaters. Like we don't really, at the time there wasn't a lot of like knitwear production locally. So I would get that I would work with artisans in Ireland, or there were like a few exceptions to that. If the artisan was from another part of the world, then we would work directly with them. So I was there, for a long time. And then ever since leaving Freeman's, I I wasn't actually sure what I was going to do. I considered leaving fashion altogether. I went to culinary school at the Natural Gourmet Institute, but I ended up working freelance because I had two friends that asked me to. This brand Outlier, which is a pretty pioneering brand within the, actually, it's not even sportswear. It's, Outlier is hard to describe, but they were very innovative, direct to consumer brand only. And then this brand Permanent Collection. So my friend Mariah Nielsen, who actually I also went to school with at CCAC, and then Fanny Singer, who actually just released a book on cooking with her mom. They started this beautiful brand Permanent Collection, and our values sort of matched in that it was a very it's inspired by modern and contemporary design objects. Mariah's father was a famous sculptor and made everything in their home, and so and as does Fanny's mom, Alice Waters, is really into like craft and objects and longevity and like developing emotional relationships with your things. And so that was the basis of the permanent collections. You're creating pieces for your collection, your permanent collection. And then, I've had a variety of clients ever since, but I've really transitioned recently to creating sustainability strategy for startups and existing brands. And that was inspired both by a certificate of corporate sustainability I received from NYU, which was a really good program. I highly recommend it. And sort of taught me the framework for creating that specific strategy, both for to be used for pitch decks to go out for money, because investors are now looking for sustainability strategy, within investor pitch decks, but it's also implementable. So it's actionable within your own company to embed sustainability in, not like these little like bolt-on initiatives. It's embedding it into your entire ethos. We start with creating your mission statements, and it allows me to work from anywhere. So I moved from New York to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, after 20 years in New York, to be closer to family and get some help with childcare. So this current format is not totally. I still was going back to New York quite often, but makes it easier to work from here. So yeah, that's where I am today. Pretty much, it's continuing to help startups and existing brands transition into truly sustainable brands that are circular, and hopefully I'm working more and more just towards regenerative business models. And yeah, that's what I do.
Well, gosh, you did a fantastic job of summarizing 20 years of a career. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions of things that you brought up, and so I'll ask those of you, and then I'd love to open questions up for the entire group. But there are a couple of things that really kind of stood out to me when you were chatting. One of which you were talking about your job at the menswear line. Sustainability wasn't baked into what you guys were doing, but you found a way to incorporate the things that you cared about into your work. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit more about how those who maybe we are working in fashion, and it's not necessarily part of our company culture, but how you're able to find ways to bring those values to your work.
Yeah. I think it will get easier and easier. And I actually don't think that there should be sustainability specific roles. If it's truly embedded into a company, it's everyone's job. It's the way people are incentivized. It's the way people work. It's the way leaders lead. It just is how you run your business. The challenge has been with larger public companies, that it's harder to get that sort of sustainability leadership from the top down, because the board and the company has a or CEO has a fiduciary duty to the shareholders and not to the other stakeholders. So consumers, and any sort of vendor partners, their employees even. The whole point of the company is to increase the value of the stock, pay dividends, bring in growth, whatnot. And so that's usually a very short-sighted view on the health of a company. And so if you work for a company and that they are still believe in shareholder supremacy, it's going to be hard to get any movement or to be able to do much, even if you are very knowledgeable and excited and determined to work more sustainably. Unless you have support from the top, it's going to be a challenge. Not to say that you can't open up conversations and attempt to open up conversations with leaderships or direct managers or whatnot. But what you do is probably pretty prescribed and there's not a lot of leeway. Having said that, in smaller independent brands, like some of the ones I worked for, you potentially might have more leeway because you have autonomy in your job, and or you don't have shareholders that you need to answer to quarterly. But there are some larger public companies that are attempting to get B Corp certification and embed sustainability into the ethos of their brand. VF Corp just all their designers are now trained in circular methods, for example. Their North Face is working with climate beneficial materials. I think the tide has turned, and you will see more and more larger companies that are where sustainability isn't just relegated to the CSR department that's doing reporting. So that's something to look forward to, I think.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
And kind of on that note, you were talking about, with your the consulting review, the strategy of baking it into the business's ethos. I've got a question about that, but before we get to that, I wanted you went back to school. You went to NYU, and I was wondering if you could talk more about your decision to go back to school and also why you chose that particular program.
Yeah, so because I had worked for so many independent myself and independent brands, and I kept reading about this, tide of change happening within larger companies. And I had actually been interviewed by PVH and a few larger brands, and I noticed like common terms or vocabularies or strategy coming up in that I wasn't totally familiar with. So I'd considered getting an MBA, but as a, sort of single mom of a 2-year-old, it's just really not a good time. And I also felt like I knew a lot about sustainability. I still had, I had 20 years experience. So this particular program at NYU, it was affordable. It's a certificate. It was part-time, and it was exactly what I needed. They put the full syllabus on on their website. And I just needed to sort of learn the language and listen to sort of the strategy of corporate sustainability. And it was great. That's what I learned. And I also learned it's actually applicable to my smaller clients. Because now I understand both points of view and both experiences, I'm able to distill it into a protocol that also works for smaller independent brands and startups. Yeah.
That's so cool.
And Tom Whalen, she was head of the NRDC for a long time. She has a ton of experience. You get access to her. She still is the person in the videos and the person you write emails to and whatnot. She's being able to have access to her is really priceless. Yeah.
I can totally relate to this idea of, exploring more school, but also having to be thoughtful about, well, hey, I've got bills to pay and a life that I already am living. And I think one thing that is pretty neat right now is that there is a lot of different educational tools that exist out there for us. And of course, we're all coming from different, you had this robust background of experience, but it's just food for thought for all of us. So It's not necessarily we're all starting from square one. It's how can you build on the things that you already have.
Absolutely.
And
And
then,
there's a lot of free
pardon?
resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, to learn. Like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has a lot of free learning opportunities for circular design.
No, thank you. That's very helpful. And then I've got, one last question, then again, I'd love to open it up to the group.
Sure.
Something that I'd love for you to touch a bit more on, you've relocated, and I think it's so fantastic for all of us to remember that, fashion doesn't just happen in New York City. It happens all around, of course, the country, but the globe.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you could talk more about, for those who are interested in sustainable fashion, how they can find a way to be a part of this without necessarily, moving to New York or San Francisco or LA. You're living in a big city and you're doing this.
Right.
You're just doing it in a different place. So if you could talk more about that, would be love to hear.
I think that's a good question. So for me, it was a little bit of a challenge because New York does have actually a garment district where there are factories and, sales reps representing mills. And so you do have access, especially for independent and brands and startups, to like a little, supply chain that you use. And but still, I mean, everything is online at this point, and I think more and more jobs will have remote options. Getting to New York or areas, or LA or other city. Chicago has some. I know there are other areas. Nashville actually has quite a few factories now. There are other parts of the country that have like little garment districts, and I guess it really depends like on your area of expertise. Like being a marketer and living somewhere is probably a lot easier than being say a production manager, but being a designer, if you're freelance, I mean, you can work from anywhere. There's no reason why you need to be there unless they want you there for, say, fittings. But it's sort of a dialogue and a conversation, and there's a lot of independent brands opening up kind of all over the country, that it shouldn't necessarily limit you to the big cities. And those resources are always there. And if you need to go to, trade shows or other events.
I love that. So it's really, again, just, being a bit more creative, kind of thinking beyond the box. And I love what you said about it being a dialogue.
Yeah. Well, and there's also like, a lot of resources like Maker's Row is a great resource that shows manufacturing, can put you in touch with manufacturing all over the country. There's an incubator program. This woman started this startup incubator program called Fashion 45. Not Fashion 45, Factory 45. Her clients are, live all over the place. There's other companies like Hack with Design, say in Minneapolis, that does their own, like created their own production in Minneapolis. Elizabeth Susan was a great example. She sadly just folded, which makes me super sad. There's it is definitely, you have to be a slightly more creative pursuit of crafting a career in that way, but it's definitely not impossible. You just have to get kind of creative.
I love that. We've got a couple of questions in the chat that I'll call out, and then I'd love for everyone else to start asking questions. I think Lizzle, is it Lizzie or Lizzle? She was wondering, what are the top seamless knitwear companies that are incorporating sustainable business ethos?
What are the top seamless?
Seamless knitwear companies.
Companies. Like brands or people or companies that create seamless knitwear. I don't know. Actually, I don't know a ton of brands, but I know manufacturers of seamless knitwear. Anyone that has the Shimaseki whole garment machines. I actually don't know. I mean, I think seamless knitting is really cool, but I actually don't know a ton of seamless companies that use seamless knitting. I'm trying to think. Everyone I know is still linking.
And she says manufacturers in the US would be great too.
Oh, you know,
pardon me.
if you go, I don't think Simply Knitting, there aren't that many knitwear factories in the United States. There's some out in LA, but they mainly do cut and sew knits, not like sweater knits. And there are some in New York in the Northeast, Simply Knitting Mills is, but I don't think they do whole garment machines. Stoll has a whole garment development facility in the garment district in New York. So I would go on Stoll, Stoll, and Shimaseki, Shimaseki, their websites, and there will be, they will have a list of people who own their machinery and have their machinery. Sadly, the BFDA, the Brooklyn Fashion Design Accelerator, used to have some machinery. I don't know where their machinery went, unfortunately. But
well, thank you.
Yeah.
I know Yemen, who was one of our Remake ambassadors, was really excited to hear about the sustainability programs. Yemen, I'm curious if you have any other more specific questions about sustainability programs. I'm putting you on the spot, Yemen.
Hi, thank you, Robin. So my question is actually, you can hear me right now, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I've been actually checking out some sustainability programs, and one of the, I was just wondering, from your research, what are the curriculum is like? Because from what I'm understanding, it's like it kind of requires some sort of work or business experience prior to entry that would be most helpful, and then and I personally, sometimes a bit hesitant when the program is geared too much to CSR, and instead of, kind of encouraging more innovative solution thinking. So I just want to hear your opinion on all the kind of programs that are out there that you have researched or have, knowledge of. Thank you.
Are you are you looking for more design programs, or like business programs?
More towards the business program, because I think design-wise, I think there's also always a individual exploration process. So I'm just thinking how helpful these business programs are to a fashion designer's career. Or
So I went to NYU, and the woman that ran the program that I took is also head of the Center for Sustainable Business at NYU, and they have an MBA program. So I haven't that you can track, like have a sustainability track. And I didn't do the MBA program, but of all the research that I have done, like Columbia, I looked at Columbia's program. I looked, Harvard has a program. I looked at, actually even here in Wisconsin has a sustainable management program. There are a lot of sustainable management sort of programs out there now. But the NYU program is the one that I would pick if I were to do it again. And none of them are specifically targeted towards fashion, but in your sort of capstone work, you usually can narrow down the focus. The Columbia program is really great. It's just really, really expensive.
Thank you for that great question, Yemen, and for the answer, Caroline. Next up, we've got Camila, who's tuning in from San Diego, and she's interested in business and human rights. And she was wondering if you could chat a bit about how you choose and vet your clients, and as an addendum to that, how you choose and vet an employer, excuse me.
Oh, that's a really good question. So my current clients, I ask, they usually come via word of mouth, and then my website speaks pretty, or I tried to have the content speak pretty specifically to the type of work that I'm willing to do and that I do. And then there's just kind of an interview process. I hear a little bit about what they're doing first, and I'm able to gauge their level of both knowledge and commitment. a lot of the startups end up coming from outside the industry. And despite having being really well-intentioned, as I find many people are, they don't have enough information to build a business model that is as aggressive and progressive as the type I want to work with. I'm just not interested in making things like whatever you're doing has to be problem solving and or net positive or regenerative or pioneering or leading or whatnot. And that's just, I'd rather make nothing, help someone make nothing than work with someone making, like just like an organic cotton t-shirt or something like that. So that's how I vet my clients. And then employers, I mean, again, my career was mostly like word of mouth. Some of my employers were awesomer than others. And regardless, I still made it work. I still made it work to a point, but yeah, it's hard. When you're being interviewed, you're also interviewing them and you're trying to gauge their sort of values. I try and engage their values, honestly, because I have a lot of trouble I'm a truth teller, and truth tellers are really not that popular. And if I don't feel like I'm in a safe space to give honest feedback, then it's not a good working environment for me personally. I know other people can work in different environments, but yeah, it's a challenge, and I think you have to listen to your gut and also really know your own personal values, and really let them guide you, and then eventually they will align with someone or something, and you'll be like, oh, this feels good, this is it.
And I think that's just fantastic advice for anyone, no matter your interest or career path, of just really kind of, like you were saying, it's knowing what you value and the type of work environment that you thrive in. And again, like you said, because you put it out there and you were able to connect with the right people because you knew this is the type of thing that interests me and the type of places I want to work in.
Right.
The next question comes from Michelle. She is from the brand Horacena Homemade. I hope I pronounced that correctly. She has a question, a very popular question about, given the current times with COVID and whatnot, what is your take on, like, what do you think will impact change as it relates to sustainability? What impact change, sustainability implications? But we're seeing change right now, but what do you think, what's going on? How do you think it's going to impact, the future of sustainable fashion?
How is how is COVID going to? Yeah, that's the question that I feel like is posed every day. I sort of ride the waves of optimism and pessimism because I think it really could go both ways. And I don't have a crystal ball, but what I am noticing is there's a lot of the dialogue of people in general, like even in Christy's group, it's like 400 people now. The dialogue speaks to having more meaningful work and towards great interest in sustainability and learning more. And so I know that the actual workforce is very interested in it, and it's the way that they want to work. We need the leadership to also get on board. And give them opportunity to work in this way. It's like we have all these, racehorses, and they're on the putting green. We need to put them on the track and let them use their passion and expertise towards good, and building more innovative, interesting places. And that actually is part of the business case for these larger companies. The companies that have embedded sustainability or have really robust ESG, which is environmental, social, and governance strategies, perform significantly better than those who don't. And one of the reasons is if companies are just listening to shareholders, they're not listening to stakeholders. And your customers and your employees know a lot, probably know more about what's happening, the inefficiencies, the way of cost savings, the just ways to make your business better, more efficient, innovate, if they are listened to or cared about, or given the opportunity to share their knowledge, concerns, experience, and that ends up showing up in the bottom line. So you know, it takes a while for I mean, this is change. It's not just leaders to learn, it's changing a whole like economic value system. And yeah, that's going to take a little bit of time, and it's crumbling, and depending on who has power at the end of this, we'll kind of decide how sustainably we rebuild our business models and structures and whole economic system, to be honest. It really depends on who's in power also politically. You know, we see the current administration deregulating about 100 years of environmental protection as we're sitting at home sort of helpless for no reason. So we have to vote also.
Yeah. And, you know, to your point about, you know, talking about, you know, leadership within companies having to evolve, I think something that's been really neat with Remake's Pay Up campaign is that it's also a reminder of how much that we as consumers have power. The campaign it's all a matter of, you know, people signing a petition and sharing it. And every time someone would sign the petition, it would go to one of the CEOs of these companies that we were, you know, asking to pay up for orders, and they did. And we still have work to be done in that regards, but I think it just reminds us that, you know, within the companies that we work, yes, we can create change, but also thinking of ourselves as consumers and how we can use our voice to put pressure on brands so that they realize, okay, like we've got to step up.
Right.
And so, yeah, like you said, it's always different things.
Yeah. No, and that's another reason why, you know, companies with robust ESG strategies do better, is because, you know, all companies are managing risk, and one of the risks they're managing is reputational. And so if you run your business in a way that you know, values social and environmental justice, you are less likely to have reputational risk, which costs you know, customers and money, and it has real costs, negative costs. Yeah.
I'm going to pick up a question from Mercy. Mercy is starting out a career as an apparel designer and product developer in Los Angeles, and had a bit more of a question about just, you know, how to, you know, start a job in this industry. I know you've talked about how your jobs, a lot of them have come about through reference. And I wonder if you could talk about, if you know, going back to when you were early in your career and you were connecting with people, do you have any tips for someone who's starting out, like how they can make those, you know, genuine connections with people in order to find the next, you know, to build their career? If that makes sense.
Yeah. I think it's really like doing your homework and building that vocabulary, and really, you know, Linda taught me to use this, like, it's almost like a lens through which you see the world, really. And it's one that, it's one that helps you develop that vocabulary that I'm referring to. And I mean, I can give some suggestions as to where to learn to sort of build that vocabulary, who to listen to, maybe who to read, whatnot, and then seek out companies that are incredibly transparent, actually, even on their websites. So for example, Reformation, I think, does a really good job at being very transparent about what they about how they work and what they do. They just created a report card with EcoAge that speaks to both the successes and challenges they've had in developing a sustainable supply system and project. Patagonia is also very transparent, and there's this like ongoing dialogue. So companies with transparency, both you will learn a lot about them, and if you have these shared values and if you like what they're doing, but you also learn about the industry and what the challenges are, and what companies are working on, and how how they define their success in being sustainable or circular or regenerative or whatnot. So yeah, I would pay attention and follow the pioneers. Really, I was always looking for the pioneers, the people that were ahead of the game and the first.
It also sounds like, because you, again, we're following something you were genuinely interested in and really excited about. I'm going to venture to guess these conversations were a little easier because you were coming at it from a place of, I need a job. It wasn't that. It was more of just like, I'm interested in this and I want to learn from you. And so that made the connection easier because you weren't necessarily asking for a job. You were just curious about their work. What do you?
Yeah, that, or I had ideas. I mean,
yeah.
I was like, we should do it this way, or this is, but I don't like to damn anyone. I don't think guilt is a very effective way of working with someone or persuading someone to work in another way. I think part of my success is I was always really excited about this other way of working or designing or building supply chains. I was like, no, we could do it this way and it would be fun or cost effective or better because of whatever I was trying to explain. And that's more fun to work with, honestly. It's than being like, you're poisoning people because you use conventional cotton. You're like, no, look over here. This farmer's doing this really cool thing and blah, blah, blah. And that's it's also just much more fun to live that way. I find sustainability really innovative and interesting and rewarding. There's one of my favorite examples. It's not a fashion brand, but I think about often is this company Greystone Bakeries, and they create all the like cookies and brownies and whatnot for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. And they also sell directly to like Whole Foods and stuff, but they have this factory in Yonkers, New York, and they have this open hiring process. And their mission statement is, we bake brownies so we can hire people, not we hire people to bake brownies. And so their open hiring practice has been so successful. They hire, it's just a line, basically. You can be, a former convict, you can be whoever, and they believe everyone deserves the right to the dignity of work. And they train them and they invest in them. And they actually don't have very high turnover. So there is a list because people like to stay because they're treated so well. And the company has been so successful that they don't just provide like healthcare benefits and childcare to their employees, they do it to their community because the company has been so wildly successful. And so they have this, like, it's this business, but that makes brownies, but they have this much larger net impact on their employees and the greater community. I mean, they're literally transforming the lives of people that wouldn't be given an opportunity in any other setting. And that's fun. I was like, oh my God, you get to bake brownies and change people's lives. Like how fun is that to wake up every day? So I just think it's way more fun than poisoning people or
love that.
chaining people to sewing machine. That's not that fun.
Again, like your energy is really contagious and it's and it's fantastic in the best way. It's like, why wouldn't you want to do this? I believe we've got a question from Michelle. Michelle, I think you raised your hand. If you'd care to share your question.
Yeah. Hi. I just want to say hi to
Hi, Michelle.
Caroline. How you doing, Caroline? I don't know if you cannot see me, right?
I can see, but I can hear you.
Okay. So yeah. So no, you answered my question.
Okay.
I said the COVID thing, but I mean, I'm just reading so many exciting things and trying to, look at another chapter because I also moved and me from way back. So I love just hearing, and I'm so happy to see you so happy doing what you love. And it's exciting. And, all these things, all these challenges just prepare us for the next step. And I'm just looking forward to the next step. For me.
Yeah, thanks. Nice hearing from you.
Nice to hear.
Michelle makes really beautiful knitwear out of Peru, alpaca.
Do you still have that vest, by the way?
Yeah, I do. Of course. Piece of the collection.
All right. Okay.
Well,
we'll connect later.
Thank
Love
you so
hearing
much
you.
for joining us, Michelle.
Thank you,
and
guys.
your question.
Thank you. Okay.
So we've got a few more minutes left. There's a question from Dustin. He's a UNESCO Research Fellow. And he was curious if there's anything that you know now that you wish that you knew when you were starting your career in sustainable fashion. What kind of advice do you have for young professionals who are starting out right now?
Anything, I mean, it's so different now than 20 years ago. I mean, the last 2 years, especially, the industry has really now taken an interest in sustainability. So, it's funny. The only thing that I think that I have truly felt regret about was initially with my brand. And this is an example of how you can have the best intentions and you learn things and things change and then you have to change. So my brand Uluru initially was cashmere based, and cashmere at the time was not, it wasn't at J. Crew, it wasn't at Gap, it wasn't at Walmart. Cashmere has been really overproduced at this point, and it's not meant to be like that. And so during the course of my maybe the third year or so I had my brand, I learned about desertification, or the impact of the growing cashmere industry on air quality and land. And I really had to pivot. And so I was looking for other materials to work with. Climate beneficial wool didn't exist at the time, but I was using merino and alpaca. And then I started working with hemps and other materials. So I'm trying to think, someone starting out now is just sort of that self-educating, looking for the leaders and the pioneers, looking for what you can do. I mean, you probably already know how detrimental or how challenging the fashion industry is for both social and environmental reasons. And so just how can you solve that problem? Like, what is the area that you think you can personally make an impact that aligns with your skills and your values? And how can you create positive change and speak to that? Because people are interested in that. They're not interested in hearing more about how crappy the industry is, or you think it is.
Wow, that was so perfect, like beautifully said. I really love that. Well, I think we have time for one last question, if anyone has one. I know there's there's been a request for, you mentioned a couple different resources that have been really helpful for you.
Oh, sure.
That's something we'd love to, Sam and I can follow up with you afterwards so we can share with the group.
Okay.
Yeah, I was like jotting down notes. I was like, I've got to check this out and this out. Well, I guess, again, Caroline, we are so grateful to have you here today. It's really special hearing someone who truly loves what they do and has explored their career in multiple ways. And you said it has been creative. And I know I'm personally walking away feeling very inspired. And I hope the rest of you guys are feeling that, yes, it's a very incredibly tough time that we're going through right now. But again, like you said, creativity, kind of figuring out what's the problem and how can I personally help with this? I think are all great questions for us to be asking ourselves right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to end with?
No, just I'm so excited you guys are all interested in sustainability and building careers around it. It's an exciting and noble thing to pursue, and I hope you don't get frustrated and you celebrate your little wins, and that we all eventually live and work in a much more sustainable world soon. I hope that's how I hope that's how the majority of people decide to rebuild and see the light.
That's a vision I can get behind. Well, again, thank you so much. Thank you all for joining. Sam, would you care to add anything?
Yeah, I'm not on mute, right?
You are,
No.
we hear you.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I just want to say thank you everyone for joining us. If you appreciate these discussions or you want to learn about more perspectives in fashion from different women who've worked in this industry, on Thursday we are talking with the founder and CEO of We Are Ha. And if you have questions about like what are people running sustainable brands doing now during COVID, how did she get to launching her sustainable brand, what does it mean to build a sustainable brand from scratch, and learning Charlene Ernster has learned over her career, her mantra that she's learned is start somewhere. And so that's a lot of our discussion will be about on Thursday at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And we'd love everyone to join as well. But thank you all. Thank you, Caroline. This is a great discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
really appreciate you joining. Thank everyone. I'll send a follow-up with this recording and the resources that we get from Caroline.
Okay.